Story 1. The latch on Grandma's porch back in '97. I was 12 and sent to stay with my grandma for the summer. Mom said she needed time to get herself sorted, which I later learned meant she'd finally left my dad. Grandma lived in an old shotgun house deep in the hills of eastern Kentucky, tucked in a place so small it didn't even have a name, just a wooden sign that leaned sideways and said, "The Holler," in crooked paint. Most of the houses had sunken roofs or broken windows, and nearly everyone still burned wood to heat their homes. There was no cable, no cell reception, and the only people under 50 had long since moved away. Grandma's house sat on a slant, with a sagging porch and one of those screen doors that made a loud springy spring whenever it opened. The main front door was thick oak with a rusted iron latch, the kind you had to tug hard and then push in just right to get it loose. She never locked it with a key, just that latch. Said it had done the job long before deadbolts ever came around. I asked her once why she didn't replace it with something newer. She just looked at me, real slow, and said, "Ain't about new or old. That latch tells me when it's time to listen." I didn't know what she meant, not then. The first week passed slowly, days full of humidity and cicadas, evenings with nothing but a creaking fan and the smell of cornbread. We'd sit on the porch after supper listening to the woods. You don't realize how loud quiet can be until you're deep in it. No traffic, no voices, just the occasional dog bark from somewhere distant and the soft crunch of leaves when something passed through the trees. I asked Grandma once what kinds of animals lived out there. She said, coyotes, foxes, things that don't like names. She wasn't the storytelling type, not like other grandmas, but she had a way of watching the woods like she expected something to step out of them, something that had been there long before we came. One night, a thunderstorm rolled through, real bad one. Lightning like a camera flashes through the windows, thunder so hard it shook the glass in the hutch. The power went out around 10, so we lit candles and sat in the kitchen, the both of us sipping room temp sweet tea and listening to the rain hammering the roof. "You'll hear the latch jiggle sometimes," she said then, like she'd been waiting to bring it up. "You don't open the door. You don't go near it. You just sit still." I asked her why. She looked past me like I wasn't there. "Sometimes things knock. Sometimes they don't. Doesn't matter. When the latch talks, you don't answer." I slept poorly that night. The wind kept catching the corner of the screen and making it snap, like a whip crack. I drifted in and out until maybe 2 or 3 in the morning when something yanked me awake. Not a sound, not exactly, more like a presence, a weight pressing down on the stillness. And then I heard it, the latch. It didn't just rattle, it struggled, like someone outside didn't know how to work it. The metal scraped and groaned the way it did when Grandma opened it, but slower and off rhythm. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. Then it snapped. That latch snapped. I heard the door creak inward. I told myself it was the wind, but the storm had passed hours ago. The air was still and thick. My bedroom door was open, and from where I lay, I could see the faint flicker of candlelight still coming from the parlor. That meant Grandma hadn't blown it out. She hadn't left her room either. I would have heard her. Then I saw them. Footprints on the old wooden floor. The boards always held moisture, and if you walked on them barefoot, they showed your steps for a while after. These were wide, flat, no heels. They led from the front door straight across the parlor and stopped near the hallway. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I stared at that space near the parlor couch for what felt like hours. I couldn't see anything, but I felt something. Breathing, low, wet, close. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I kept them closed until morning. When I finally opened them, the house was bright with sun, and the door was closed again, latch back in place. At breakfast, Grandma didn't say anything. She was reading her Bible, real slow, lips moving like she was whispering to herself. When she got up to refill her coffee, I glanced over and saw the page she'd been on. There was a torn strip of cloth marking it. It was from the book of Job. Chapter 4, verse 15. I only remember it now because I looked it up later. Then a spirit passed before my face. The hair of my flesh stood up. I asked her why she marked that page. She snapped the Bible shut without looking at me and said, "You felt it, didn't you?" We didn't talk about it again. 2 days later, she started packing up things in boxes, old photos, knitting stuff. I asked if she was moving. She nodded, said we were leaving the holler. I told her I thought she'd lived there her whole life. She just said it was long enough. We moved into a trailer park near Pikeville. She never explained, never went back for the furniture. That old house stood empty after that. Nobody else moved in. A year later, it collapsed in a landslide during a bad rain. Mud swallowed half the porch and tore the roof clean off. They never found anything unusual in the wreckage. But sometimes, when it storms, I still hear the sound of that latch, that sharp metal struggle, in dreams, or on nights when I'm alone and everything else is still. It's like it never stopped trying, like it followed the sound of my breath. And every time I hear it, I remember what Grandma said. When the latch talks, you don't answer. You. Story 2. The door with nails in the frame. I've never liked telling this story. There's no good reason to share it, no lesson, no warning that's going to save anybody. Some things just find you, and when they do, they don't care who you are or how sorry you are for opening a door that should have stayed closed. Still, I guess if it's going to keep happening, I might as well say it out loud once, so it's not just clawing around inside my head. It started late September, 3 years back. I was hiking alone behind Cold River Lake. Most people only go out that way in summer, and even then just as far as the big overlook where you can still get a signal. I'd gone further, down a dry creek bed that cuts deep between the ridges. Wasn't following a trail exactly, just looking to clear my head. I'd just gotten out of something messy, one of those breakups where nobody's right, nobody's wrong, but everything still burns going down. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birds, not even bugs. Just leaves shifting, brittle underfoot, and the occasional drip of water echoing off slick stone. That's when I found the shack. It didn't look like much from the outside, just 4 walls of warped wood and a tin roof half caved in. But the door caught my eye. Not because of the door itself, it was plain, rotted through at the bottom, but because of the frame. Dozens of old, rusted nails hammered all around the perimeter, not in any kind of order, some bent, some sunk too deep, some sticking out like teeth. It looked like whoever put them there had done it in a hurry, or in fear, or both. But they were only in the frame, not the door, as if the purpose wasn't to hold the door but to surround it, like a warning, or a seal. I wish I'd turned around. The inside smelled like wet ash and moldy blankets. The light through the broken roof barely reached the corners, and the dust in the air made everything feel heavier. There was nothing in there. Not really. Just a few broken boards, a collapsed cot in the back, and a sunken patch of earth near the center that looked darker than it should have in that dim space. I didn't stay long, a couple minutes maybe, long enough to feel something crawling up the back of my neck. Not physically, but like the part of your brain that still remembers caves and predators was tugging on your spine, whispering that you shouldn't be there. I stepped out slowly. I didn't slam the door. I didn't touch it. But as I walked maybe 20 yards up the hill, I heard it. The door creaked, then groaned open behind me, and then something moved. Not footsteps, not a voice. Crawling, heavy, scraping, wet. I never turned around. I don't think I could have. My legs just kept going. My whole body felt like it had sunk into itself, and I swear I didn't breathe until I was back on the paved road 2 hours later, panting next to my truck. That night, I slept with the TV on. Didn't tell anyone about it. I figured it was some old drug den, or a bad memory that still clung to the place. I told myself the smell was mildew, that the crawling sound was just an animal, maybe a raccoon. But then, about 2 weeks later, I woke up at 2:12 in the morning to a sound I knew too well, my bedroom door creaking open. At first I thought it was just loose hinges. My house is old, floors creak, things shift. But when I sat up and looked, the door was wide open, and I always shut it before bed. No footsteps, no voices. But the air in the room felt wrong, pressurized, like the second before a thunderclap. The next night, it happened again. 2:12 a.m. The door creaked open, nothing there. The third night, I tried locking it. The knob turned anyway. Slow, like someone was figuring it out. I sat there under the covers, my breath tight, and I saw the handle twitch. Once, twice, and then stop. Then the door opened again. That time, it didn't just open, it drifted. Like someone was pushing it just hard enough to move the air but not make a sound. I started nailing it shut after that. Hammered 2 nails into the frame each night before bed, right above the knob and into the jamb. I still do it, every night. Doesn't stop the creaking, doesn't stop the air from going cold, but it keeps the door shut. Mostly. The thing is, sometimes I still hear the sound of nails bending. I'll wake up in the dark and it's quiet, but too quiet, like something's waiting to see if I'll notice. And when I do, when my eyes are open and I'm straining to hear, I'll catch the faintest creak, like wood shifting under weight. Not footsteps, just pressure. And always around 2:12. I've tried moving, it followed me. New house, new door, new nails, same time. I even burned sage once. Left the Bible open by the foot of the bed. I'm not religious, but I was desperate. The next morning the page was torn and the cross I'd tacked above the headboard had fallen off. One night I got brave, or stupid. I left the door unlocked, told myself I'd face whatever it was. At 2:12 the knob didn't turn. Instead I heard it behind me, something shifting in the closet. I don't remember getting under the bed, but that's where I woke up. And the closet door? It was open too. Now I keep both doors nailed shut, but there's something about nails. You hammer them in, and over time they loosen, they rust, they slip. I replace them every week. I hammer until the wood splinters, but sometimes I wake up and find one on the floor. Just one. Always bent. And every time I think about that shack, about the nails around the frame, not the door. Like whoever lived there knew, no matter what you did, some things don't need a key, some things only need a crack. And now, I wait, every night, because whatever it was that crawled across that cabin floor, it found its way in, and it's still looking for the right door. Story 3. The Man Who Knocked. 4 times. When I was 10, my dad left the trailer unlocked for the first time. It wasn't an accident. He did it on purpose. I remember the way he said it, half under his breath while pouring his last splash of coffee. Ain't no one coming up this high, not without a damn reason. Our trailer sat at the top of a logging road that had mostly washed out years back, just past a hairpin turn that even locals didn't like taking after dark. We were deep in McCreary County, where the woods don't just stretch, they breathe. It had always been just the 2 of us. My mom ran off when I was 4. Dad said she couldn't handle the quiet. I think she just couldn't handle him, the way he got when the sun dipped low and the bottle got light. He was hard, but never cruel. Built like a tree stump and smelled like cigarettes and pine sap. Always kept his boots by the door and the shotgun within arm's reach. That first night, it was still real. still in that way the woods get when something's watching. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I was lying on the pull-out couch, half asleep, when I heard the knocks. 4 of them. Too slow, too fast, not loud, not frantic, just purposeful. I sat up, heart stalling in my chest. I remember thinking how strange it was that they weren't knocking on the metal part of the trailer door, but on the wooden frame around it. That was higher up. Dad came out of his room, already holding the shotgun. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just opened the door and pointed it out into the night. Nobody was there. The flashlight beam cut across our gravel yard, over the dead lawnmower, the rusted truck frame, and out into the line of trees, but it caught nothing, just thick woods and deeper dark. He closed the door without a word, locked it this time. The next day, he acted like nothing happened, drank his coffee, fed the dog, mumbled about needing to fix the roof where rain had gotten in last week. But that night, it happened again. 4 knocks, same rhythm, too slow, too fast. This time, Dad didn't open the door right away. He stood in the kitchen with the lights off, just listening, the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. I could hear him breathing, shallow and tight. He finally cracked the door and shouted out into the night, "Ain't no damn joke!" Silence answered. The woods swallowed everything like they always do. On the 3rd night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat with the covers pulled up to my chin, eyes fixed on the door. Dad stayed up too. He moved his chair next to the window, set the shotgun across his lap, and just waited. The knocks didn't come. Not at midnight, not at 1, not at 2, but just before dawn. I must have dozed off. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was bleeding through the blinds, and the door was wide open, no signs of force, no busted lock, just open, like someone had stood there for a while, then stepped inside, or maybe our dad wasn't in the chair. I called his name. No answer. I checked the kitchen, then the back bedroom. Empty. Then I looked outside. The shotgun was sitting on the porch steps. Still warm. Barrel pointed at nothing. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, shivering barefoot in the doorway, staring into the woods. He never came back. No tracks. No blood. No sign of struggle. The sheriff came out, shrugged, said he probably walked off drunk and got turned around. But his boots were still by the door. He never left without his boots. Folks from the county offered to take me in, but I ended up with my aunt down in Corbin. She didn't ask questions, didn't want to know. I didn't tell anyone about the knocks. I thought they were done, but they weren't. Years passed. I grew up, got a job at the sawmill. I tried to live like nothing ever happened. But then one night, alone in my apartment, I heard it again. 4 knocks. Too slow, too fast. Not on the door this time, on the wall, up high, like before. I didn't open it. I just sat on the floor, shaking until the sun came up. Now it happens every few months. No pattern I can find. No reason. Just those 4 knocks, always around 3 a.m., always higher than they should be. Sometimes I think I see something in the corner of my eye, tall, still, just beyond the edge of the light. But it's never there when I look straight at it. I tried leaving once. Drove 3 states over, stayed in a motel. They knocked on the window. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they're looking for Dad, or if they are him. All I know is, I've stopped answering. I sit in the dark and wait until it's over. Because if I open the door, I don't think I'll be the one who comes back. Story 4. Behind the Pantry Door. We moved to Tuckaleechee in the fall, right as the trees started turning and the chill hit the bones of the valley before it touched the skin. My wife, Erin, wanted somewhere quiet, someplace out of the way, away from Knoxville, from the noise and the job that had chewed both of us down to gristle. We weren't running from each other exactly. but something had gone thin between us. Words got shorter. The silences are heavier, so we found a rental tucked deep into a wooded hollow, an old white farmhouse that sat crooked on a patch of land that had clearly once been loved and long since forgotten. The windows rattled when it got windy, and the floors had that soft give to them, like they remembered every step that had ever been taken. The pantry door was the first thing I noticed. It wouldn't stay shut. It was one of those narrow little things beside the kitchen, barely wide enough for a person. I'd latch it every morning after breakfast, not with a key or lock, just one of those simple brass hooks. And by evening, it'd be open again. Not wide, just a crack. Erin said it was the frame, warped from years of humidity or settling foundation. That made sense the first week, but then I started noticing when it opened, always sometime after midnight, and always followed by that faint, wet shuffle, like someone dragging something along old wood. I didn't say anything at first. I'm not superstitious, never have been. But there's something about living that far from town, that deep into the hills, where your closest neighbors are 1.5 miles away, and the road to your driveway doesn't show up on Google Maps. You start to feel things. One night, I stayed up reading in the kitchen. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard it. A click. Soft, almost polite. The pantry door was open again, and this time I heard something else. Whispering. Low, rhythmic, like someone reciting a list over and over. The words didn't make sense, but the cadence did. Slow at first, then faster, like a memory trying to catch up with itself. I stood there, frozen by the sink, staring at that black sliver between the door and the frame. My skin went cold, every hair stood up. And then it stopped. No slam, no footsteps, just silence. The next morning, Erin was in a mood, said she couldn't find her wedding ring. She never took it off, not even for dishes. We turned the place upside down, checked every drain, every drawer, nothing. She was more upset than she let on. That night, I set up a camera. Just an old webcam plugged into my laptop, angled straight at the pantry door. Motion detection turned on. Erin rolled her eyes but didn't argue. We went to bed. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up gasping, not from a noise, from a dream, except I don't remember what it was, only that it felt like someone had leaned down right beside me and whispered into my mouth. I checked the footage the next morning. The door opened at exactly 3:17. Not fast, not suddenly, just that same gentle pull, like someone inside had been waiting and didn't want to wake the rest of the house. It stayed open for hours. Nothing came out, nothing moved in the frame. But when I walked into the kitchen, every item from the pantry, every can, every box, every spice jar was sitting on the floor, stacked into little piles, neat, deliberate, like someone was organizing them. I asked Erin if she'd done it. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, said she hadn't even gone into the kitchen since dinner. We cleaned it up together, and I nailed the pantry door shut that afternoon. But the next morning, it was open again. Nails bent, hook latch snapped clean off, and something new was there. In the far back corner of the pantry, one of the floorboards had shifted, pried up just enough to see there was space underneath. I pulled it back with the claw end of a hammer. There, half buried in dust and mouse droppings, was Erin's wedding ring. She was standing behind me. She didn't say anything at first, just stared down into that little black hole under the floor. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "I didn't lose it," she whispered. I turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I didn't lose it," she repeated slower. "I put it in the drawer. I remember." We moved out 2 days later. Didn't even ask for the deposit. Sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I still hear the whispering, like someone going over a list of names. Not mine, hers. And I think about that ring. how it ended up under that board, how carefully the food was sorted, and what else might have been organized once we left. I keep a nightlight on now, and I don't store anything I care about behind closed doors. Story 5. The Door in the Hillside Church. There's a place off Route 28, just past where the pavement breaks and the dirt road curls into the trees like it's ashamed to be seen. Sourwood Hollow, they call it. I doubt you'll find it on a map. Most folks who grew up nearby pretend it doesn't exist. I didn't even know it was a real place until I started drinking with a guy named Trevor back in my early 20s. One of those wiry, wild-eyed types who'd smile too wide when something wasn't funny. He liked to talk big when he drank. Said he knew all the places the locals wouldn't go after sundown. And one night, full of cheap whiskey and worse decisions, he offered to take me to the Buried Preacher's Church. We drove for an hour with the headlights bouncing off trees that pressed in too close. Somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing the road and Trevor stopped talking, just stared out the window like he was listening to something. The church wasn't a church anymore, just bones of one. The steeple had collapsed years ago, half covered in ivy and rot. The stained glass was long gone, but the wooden frame still clung together like it didn't know how to fall all the way. I remember the smell before anything else. Wet dirt, burned cloth. That scent of something left underground too long. Trevor hung back at the door, muttering something about how he wasn't the one being called. I laughed, stupid and loud, trying to cover the chill in my chest, and stepped inside. The pulpit was still there, leaning to one side. Behind it, the floorboards had been pried up and poorly nailed back down, and at the base, where a preacher might have stood to deliver his last sermon, there was a small green door. Not painted green, the wood was green, mossy and damp, like it had been grown, not built. I bent down. Something about it made my throat dry. The handle was bone cold, but I pulled it anyway. It opened smoother than it should have, no stairs. Just black, and the humming. At first, I thought it was a hymn, one I knew. The kind they used to sing at the old Baptist church my grandma took me to as a boy. But it was off. Wrong tempo. The melody twisted up, like someone who'd heard the song only once was trying to fake their way through it. The sound came up from the darkness, growing louder the longer I listened. And then, underneath it, breathing. Heavy and wet, like something was struggling to hold the tune. I slammed the door shut, or I tried to. It fought me, like something below didn't want it closed. I had to put my whole weight into it before it finally snapped shut, and even then the hinges groaned like they weren't used to being touched. I didn't look back. I ran, past Trevor, who stood frozen like a scarecrow with tears down his face. I didn't wait for him. I didn't care. I got in the truck and drove until I saw real lights again. That was 6 years ago. Since then the doors won't close for me. Not all at once. It started with the one in my bedroom. I'd shut it tight, double check it, even wedge a towel underneath. But I'd wake up to it cracked open. Then it was the door to my apartment. Then the bathroom stall at work. Then cabinets. Then locks. They don't hold. Not around me. I've replaced deadbolts. Paid to have doors rehung. I've even stayed in hotels across the state just to see if it's the buildings. It's not. Doors refuse to stay shut. And sometimes they open by themselves. Always slow. Always gentle. Like something is checking to see if I'm watching. At first I thought maybe I'd brought something back with me. Something from beneath that green door. But it's not like that. It's not with me. It's watching. And it doesn't like closed doors. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I hear the humming. Same song. Always just on the edge of memory. Familiar, but turned inside out. I've tried humming it back, just to see. My voice doesn't stay steady when I do. Something in my chest tightens and the lights flicker, and the door nearest me opens a crack. Last week, I nailed every door in my house shut. Every single one. That night, I woke up at 3:13 a.m. and every nail was on the floor. Stacked, not scattered, stacked. Like someone had set them down carefully. I still have them, sitting in a glass jar next to my bed. I don't know what's worse, hearing the humming and not knowing what's down there, or knowing it remembers me. And wait, because I opened the door, and somewhere in that church, maybe deep below the floorboards, something started breathing again, and now it wants mine in return. Story 6. Something opened our truck door. We were camping out on an old strip mine plateau that summer, me and my older brother, Hank. He'd been laid off from the mill in Corbin, and I was between jobs trying to shake off a bad breakup. We figured a weekend out in the woods would do us some good. No phones, no folks. Just a cooler full of beer and a rust-bitten Ford Ranger parked 30 minutes up an unmarked fire road. The place had been cleared out decades ago, flattened and scraped clean for coal. Trees were trying to come back, but the ground was still stubborn. Half-grown pines, patches of rock and moss, and a silence that settled over the land like something had pressed its hand over the mouth of the place. It felt wrong the way clearings sometimes do, too open, too quiet, like nothing wanted to grow there anymore. We pitched a little tent just off the gravel turnout, cooked beans over a fire ring made from tailings, and sat there watching the sky go from blue to bruise. It was good, mostly. Hank talked more than usual, told stories I'd forgotten. We laughed harder than we had in years. Before we turned in, he locked the truck. I remember that specifically. He clicked the fob twice. Chirp, chirp. Then pulled on the door to make sure, said you couldn't be too careful even out here. But I woke up cold sometime after 3 a.m. At first, I thought I'd kicked off my sleeping bag, then I saw it. The driver's side door was wide open, nothing was stolen, no broken windows, just open. And our boots were gone. We searched the camp by flashlight. I expected to find them dumped in the bushes or chewed up by some raccoon. Instead, we found them 40 yards out, set side by side on a bed of moss like someone had placed them there, perfectly upright. Mine on the left, Hank's on the right, untied but still neatly arranged. We didn't say much after that, just grabbed the boots, locked the truck again, and tried to laugh it off. Told ourselves we must have forgotten to actually lock it. Or maybe the latch was faulty. The old truck had seen better days. The second night, we left the windows cracked to keep the tent from getting stuffy. Around 2:30, I woke up to a sound. Tapping, not from the outside, from the inside of the truck. Soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on glass. Tap, 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 tap. I froze. Hank sat up beside me, eyes wide, breath held. We listened together, not speaking, not daring to move the zipper. Then the tapping stopped. We waited 10 minutes, then 20. When we finally crawled out, the truck was still there, doors closed, but the driver's side window was fogged from the inside, not from breath, from the pressure of skin. You could see the prints, smudged in long arcs like something had pressed both palms against the glass and just held them there. We didn't grab the gear, didn't pack the tent. We just got in and drove. Barefoot. The lock wouldn't engage when we tried it. Even now, it still won't work. Right. I had the whole system replaced. New actuator, new latch assembly. The mechanic said everything looked fine, but every couple weeks, I find the door ajar again. Not wide, just enough to let the dome light flicker. And last month, I came out to find my boots sitting on the hood, side by side, untied, dry, even though it had rained all night. I don't camp anymore, haven't left the city since. But sometimes, late, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I'll hear that same soft tapping, not on the windows, on the inside of my closet door, and every time I check the locks, every damn one of them. But there's no sound a lock makes that guarantees something isn't already in. Story 7. The cabin that didn't like. Guests, we weren't supposed to be that far off trail. Me and Kate, we'd taken a weekend to hike out past Watauga Lake, looking for that kind of silence you only get where the trees grow too thick for reception. No emails, no calls, no anything but wind and footsteps. The ranger station had warned about some weather coming in late Sunday, so we figured 2 nights max, out and back. But late Saturday afternoon, just past a ridge neither of us remembered crossing, we stumbled on a spur trail, barely there, more of a suggestion than a path, leading deeper into the trees, and something about it pulled at us. It led us to a clearing where an old log cabin stood, half sunken into the earth like it had grown tired of holding itself up. The roof slouched, but the shingles looked too new. The front steps were damp, but not rotted. Someone had been there recently. The odd thing was the front door. It kept swinging open, even when the wind was still. I wedged it shut with a flat stone. Came back 5 minutes later, it was open again. Not wide, just cracked. Inside, the place smelled like moss and stove ash. The furniture was sparse, a table, 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, but clean, too clean. No cobwebs, no dust in the corners, just a stillness that sat in your chest. There were 2 rooms, the main one, where we dropped our packs, and the guest room. That door was different, lighter wood, no latch. But whenever we opened the front door, even a little, that guest room door would slam shut, like a reaction, like balance. Kate said it was airflow, pressure, some nonsense she remembered from physics class. But there wasn't enough draft in that old cabin to move anything heavier than a feather, let alone a whole door. After dark, it got worse. We had the fire going and a single lantern flickering shadows up the beams. The guest room stayed shut like it was holding its breath. I tried not to think about it, but then I heard the pacing. Slow, deliberate. From inside that room, creak, step, pause, back and forth. I whispered to Kate, asking if she heard it. She nodded, but didn't say anything. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Then I got up and opened the door. There was nothing there. Just a single bed, but the sheet had been pulled tight, corners tucked, and on the near pillow, the fabric was still indented, like someone had just risen from it. The pacing stopped. I shut the door again, this time gently. We didn't sleep much. Every time I dozed, I'd hear it again, that same rhythm. Step, step, pause. Always starting and stopping in the same place. In the morning, the front door was open again, wide this time. Kate said we should leave. We packed in silence. I opened the guest room once more before we left. The bed was empty, but both pillows were fluffed now, and folded neatly at the foot was a small blanket, one we hadn't seen before. Brown wool, smelled faintly of lavender and something older. I didn't take it, didn't touch it. We hiked out faster than we should have. By nightfall we were back at the car. I don't know what that cabin was. I don't think it wanted us there, and I don't think it ever locked that front door, not to keep people out, but to let something back in. Story 8. My aunt's door never closed again. My Aunt Rowena lives in a trailer now, down in the back corner of a quiet little park south of Paint Rock, hemmed in by sycamores and silence. She keeps to herself mostly, doesn't go to church anymore, doesn't talk much either, unless it's about the door. If you bring up Uncle Matt, she won't say a word, but if you ask about the door, even just mention it in passing, she'll look you dead in the eye and say, "It still opens." 4:09 every night. I used to think it was grief. They'd been married nearly 30 years, didn't have kids, just each other in a house on Ridgeback Hill that always smelled like boiled potatoes and lavender soap. I stayed with them some summers growing up, back when Mum was working 2 jobs and didn't want me alone. The house wasn't spooky, not then, just old. Uncle Matt was a kind man, quiet but kind. He'd fall asleep in his recliner with the weather radio on, and sometimes he'd forget he was holding a cup of coffee until it sloshed into his lap. My aunt used to tease him for it, but there was love in it. A soft sort of teasing that only comes when 2 people have memorized each other's breath. The last time I saw him was 3 weeks before he vanished. I'd stop by on my way through town, just to say hey and maybe bum a meal. Aunt Rowena was making dumplings, and Uncle Matt was upstairs taking a nap. I asked if he was feeling all right. She frowned and said he'd been really tired lately, not quite himself. Woke up confused sometimes, saying strange things. Once, she told me, he'd looked at her with wet eyes and said, "The door's been whispering again." I didn't think much of it then. Folks say odd things when they get older. Then came the night. Aunt Rowena told me she woke up around 4 in the morning because of the wind. Said she heard something shifting downstairs, the front door creaking open just a little. She figured Matt had gone down to check the porch, or maybe just forgot to close it all the way earlier. But when she got up an hour later, he wasn't in bed or downstairs or anywhere. His slippers were still beside the bed, his glasses on the nightstand. The coffee cup he always left in the sink was still there, unwashed. But the front door? Wide open, no signs of struggle, no muddy footprints or blood. Just the door, gently swaying in the breeze. She called the police, of course. They searched the woods, the river, even drained a small pond nearby. Nothing, no trace. It was as if he'd just stepped out and disappeared into the dark. She tried everything after that. Changed the lock, replaced the entire door, even had the frame removed and rebuilt by some folks from the church. It didn't matter. Every night at exactly 4:09 a.m., the door creaked open. Not fast, not loud, just a slow, gentle groan, like someone slipping quietly out, trying not to wake the house. She started setting up a chair by the door, sitting there with a cup of tea and her Bible, trying to pray it shut. She told me she saw shadows once. Not people, just outlines. Hazy, blurred, like the air got thick and took a shape of something it remembered. Eventually, she moved, packed up what little she cared to take and left the rest behind. Said the house didn't feel like hers anymore. She found a trailer, plain, nothing fancy, just enough room for her and her quiet. The first night there, she locked the door and pushed a chair against it for good measure. It didn't matter. 4:09 a.m. Creak. Open. She told me that it was just weather, like she'd accepted it, the way someone accepts bad knees or a leaky faucet. I didn't believe her. Not really. Not until I stayed over. She was having a hard week. Some tests at the clinic, and I offered to keep her company. I slept on the pullout in the den, set an alarm for 4:05 just to prove her wrong. At 4:08, the air went still, not quiet, still, like the trailer itself held its breath. Then right on time, I heard it. Creak, soft and slow. The front door was open 3 inches, no wind, no movement, just open. I got up and shut it, turned the knob until it clicks, even braced it with my hand for a minute like I was daring it to try again. Nothing happened, but when I went back to the couch, I saw something. A wet footprint. Just one. Bare. Not hers. Not mine. Pointed inward. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Didn't say anything in the morning either. Just made coffee and handed her her favorite mug. She didn't ask if I heard it. She knew. Some nights. I wonder where he went. Whether he walked through that door on his own, or whether something came for him, and if so, what it was waiting for. Because that door doesn't just open, it invites. And someday, maybe it won't close behind me either. Story 9. Door to the root cellar. It was the kind of cold that made your bones sting. The kind of cold where the wind doesn't howl. It presses, like it's trying to push you out of your own skin. That winter, the one I'm talking about, we lost power during the first real snow. Grandpa's old house wasn't built for that kind of deep freeze. It groaned through the walls like the whole place was remembering something worse. We were staying with him for the season, me, my mom, and my little sister Carly, after the divorce. She didn't want to stay in town, didn't want to run into Dad's people at the grocery store, and didn't want to keep explaining herself. Grandpa's place out near Laurel Fork was her idea of silence, of starting over. The house was a long rectangle, low-roofed and slanted, tucked into the base of a hill where the trees bunched together like a secret. He heated it with an old wood stove and stocked shelves like he still expected ration lines. There was one hallway, 2 bedrooms, and a trap door in the kitchen floor that we were told not to use. Full of spiders, Grandpa said the first day we arrived, waving one of his shaking hands in that half-joking, half-serious way of his. And maybe worse. I thought it was just a joke, something old people say when they don't want kids messing around. He never looked me straight in the eye when he said it. But even so, I noticed he never walked over that part of the kitchen, never let the chair legs touch it. The power went out during a sleet storm in early January. Wind snapping the trees like dry bones and the sky thick with nothing. The stove kept the place just above freezing, but by nightfall, we needed light. Carly had a flashlight, but it was half dead. The candles were down in the root cellar. That trapdoor had a metal ring nailed into the center, and a splintered edge where something had once chewed at it, maybe mice. I asked Grandpa again if it was all right to go down. He didn't answer, just sat in his chair, staring at the empty TV screen like he was trying to remember something too old to say out loud. Mom was out back, breaking up kindling. Carly was wrapped in 3 blankets on the couch, so I pulled the trapdoor open. The hinges groaned, long and slow, like a breath after a long silence. It smelled like cold dirt and wet wood. No movement, no spiders. I dropped down slowly, 1 foot at a time, onto the wooden stairs. They didn't creak, just flexed beneath me. The space below was cramped, more like a crawl space than a real cellar. Just a few shelves, some old boxes, and a row of mason jars lined up like forgotten soldiers. The candles were there in a tin bucket, half melted but dry. I grabbed them, turned, and started back up. That's when the trap door slammed, hard, caught me right on the shoulder. I yelped and stumbled, scraping my hand on the step. At first, I thought it was the wind. Maybe Carly is messing around. But when I got back up and opened the door, no one was there. The air above felt colder than the cellar. I came out, bruised and shaken, but didn't say anything. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet and the stove hissed in its sleep, I woke up to the sound of the trapdoor opening. Not slamming this time, just opening, real slow. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed into the kitchen. The trapdoor was open maybe 4 inches. No wind, no one near it. I leaned down, half expecting to hear mice or the shifting of the jars, but instead I heard breathing, not loud, not gasping, just steady, measured, like someone waiting at the bottom. I didn't open it further, didn't shine a light, just shut it, quiet as I could. The next morning, the ring handle was pointing the other direction. Carly said she dreamed someone was on the floor, asking for help. Said she saw fingers poking through the cracks in the wood. I told her it was just a dream, but I don't think she believed me. I know I didn't. A few nights later, I tried to wedge a chair over the trapdoor. It moved by morning, always just a little. The ring turned, a faint scrape across the wood. I stopped walking into the kitchen at night, started keeping the candles in the living room instead, but the breathing didn't stop. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear it through the floorboards, right under my bed, low, patient, waiting. Grandpa passed away that March. I just didn't wake up. Mum sold the house a few months later, said she didn't want to hang on to old ghosts. But I still think about that cellar, about what waited in the dirt, not evil exactly, not violent, just patient. Like it knew eventually someone would come down and not come back up. And sometimes, just before sleep, I still hear it. That soft, steady breath. Like the earth itself is remembering me. Story 10. The motel room without a lock. It was late, past midnight, when we pulled into the motel just outside Elkhorn City. Rain had followed us all through the mountains, thick and low, like the sky had sunk into the trees. The kind of rain that makes the headlights feel useless. We'd been driving for hours, and the last sign we passed said vacancy in flickering neon, half burnt and humming like it was too tired to lie. The room they gave us was thin-walled and damp, smelled like old carpet and rusted metal left out too long. The kind of smell you don't forget because it clings to your clothes and skin. The lights buzzed, the AC wheezed, but it was a shelter, and we were too tired to argue with anything that had a roof. It was the door that made my stomach drop. No lock, not broken, just missing. No deadbolt, no latch, just a handle that turned smooth and easy, like it had been used too often by too many. I tried to laugh about it and pushed a chair under the knob. It wobbled, but it was something. Sometime around 3, I woke up. Couldn't tell why, not at first. The air felt too still. The rain had stopped. Then I saw the doorknob turning, slow, deliberate. The chair slid half an inch across the floor, and the door opened. No one was there. No footsteps, no voices. Just empty, yellow hallway light spilling into the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just sat there, watching that open door. By morning, my suitcase had been unzipped, nothing stolen, but every piece of clothing had been removed, folded, and laid on the floor in the shape of a man. Story 11. The sound the screen door made. There's a sound you don't forget, not ever. The metallic snap of a screen door spring stretching, followed by that soft, hollow slap when it shuts. It sticks in your mind, even years later. That summer, we stayed in Great Pines. I heard that sound every night, always around 1 a.m., never loud, never rushed. Just the creak of the spring, the door swinging out slowly, and the gentle clap as it swung back in place. We were up there for my dad's health. Air was supposed to be better in the mountains, the kind of air that could maybe buy him a few more months. My sister Lila and I were bored out of our minds. 2 kids caught between the weight of things we weren't old enough to name. The cabin was small, warped in places. Real old. It sat on the edge of a dense thicket that never quite felt empty, even in daylight. The porch had a screen door that wouldn't stay latched, and at first, we thought the wind was doing it, but the trees barely moved after sunset. Still, every night at 1 o'clock sharp, that door would creak open, pause, and close. No footsteps, no voices, just that sound. I started staying up, told myself I'd catch whatever it was. One night, I finally did. At 12:57, I sat on the couch, lights off, and a blanket tight around me. The room was heavy with stillness. Then, right on time, the spring groaned. The door opened, real slow, and stopped halfway. Something stepped through. I say something because I didn't see a shape, just a shift. The air changed, thickened, like it bent around something tall and quiet. No prints, no breath, just presence. The door never closed all the way, just drifted shut like a sigh. In the morning, Lila was gone, her bed untouched. No open windows, only that screen door resting against the frame like nothing had happened.